It's another Wednesday. We'll just call this a World Series Wednesday, and we're hitting it real hard. Listen, y'all, we're talking about World Series investing opportunities, World Series investing opportunities, dealing with faith and finances. Once again, you do not have to die broke. You do not have to die broke. You can make a difference and change your life. Let's get this thing started. The World Series is going on right now. The Dodgers versus the Blue Jays. It's an intense battle going on. The other day they went 18 innings. Ridiculous. We're getting a decent October that baseball fans await, and two fan bases are rallying to try and get this World Series championship. But in the midst of that, there are some opportunities. Let me be clear. There are some opportunities in order to invest and get ahead throughout this whole process. Let me share just a few pieces that we have available to us as we look at this World Series. Number one, look who's playing. The Dodgers used to be owned by Fox. They used to appear on Fox all the time. Okay, but turn, if you will, to the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are owned by Rogers Communication. And with the Blue Jays being owned by Rogers Communications, that means that with Rogers, you get a lot of sports affiliation. You've got not only the MLB, but you also have Canadian football. You also have MLS with the Toronto football clubs. You end up with the Toronto Maple Leafs as part of that venture. And then you end up with the Toronto Raptors as part of it, NBA club. Come on, man. They've got sports and communications all wrapped in one. It's kind of like a Canadian version of Madison Square Garden sports, right? And so not only is it a stock that's trading at a decent level, right around $30, $32 per share, but they also have currently a 3%, just over a 3% yield on that stock. So if you're a dividend investor, it's also an opportunity. So look at Rogers Communication. That's a potential investment where you get a piece of the Blue Jays, a piece of the Raptors, a piece of NHL, a piece of Major League Soccer, as well as Canadian Football League. Full gamut. Total cornucopia of sports Canadian style. There you go. But that's not it. If you're going to watch MLB sports, you're watching it and you're most probably going to get it on one of these. Here we go. One of the top ones I'd say is a streaming service, YouTube TV. And who owns YouTube TV? Well, Google. Google coming back after it split. Google is still just around $200, right? Great investment, is pushing, and it's driving the NASDAQ along with some other stocks. I would definitely look at it. YouTube TV, Google, that's one opportunity that you have right there in the World Series, broadcasting continually. Get with it, right? YouTube TV. To go along with that, we can't forget One of my recent favorites. It's not really a fintech stock, but it's in the broadcasting realm. It's on the realm to connect further with Hulu and bring us live sports, and that's Fubo TV. Fubo TV, live sports broadcasting. And so Fubo, that's moving up. It's inching up a little bit from where we originally got into it. Still around $4 per share. But Fubo TV is in the works with a merger with Hulu, which means it's in a merger with the juggernaut of streaming and sports, and that's going to be Disney. Disney. So if you're watching it, Hulu Live, Fubo, things like that, um, guess what? You're also going to get broadcasts and updates on the World Series via ESPN. Get the highlights. Okay. Um, who owns all that? Disney, the juggernaut of sports media right now. And so why not? Disney is still hovering about $120, and it's still outstanding as far as its catalog of what it offers. And so I would say definitely push into Disney if you want a piece of the World Series because they've got sports covered. Don't worry about Prime and what it's doing as far as the NBA. No biggie, no biggie. And there's another one here that I have to mention, and that would definitely have to be Nike. Nike. And I say Nike because Nike is MLB uniforms as well as sports equipment. Nike is still suffering from some of the downturn in the previous year, still sitting under $100, but Nike is still a prominent player in the sports world. We can't forget that Nike is still a prominent player in the sports world. So spin this around a little bit. What am I saying as far as sports investing? Right? You could get into numerous things, and I'm a big advocate as a sports fan and an investor of getting into ownership of opportunities to invest in sports teams. Early on, when I first started investing, one of the things I purchased was the Boston Celtics. It was a limited partnership, just the opportunity to own the Celtics. It was Bird, Parrish, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge, uh, the full legacy of the Celtics with Bill Russell and oh man, come on, Red Auerbach, come on. I was excited. Even as a Laker fan, I was excited to have ownership in that. And now, moving forward, with that partnership having been dissolved, now owning Madison Square Garden Sports, despite everything else you say, um, that gives us a diversity, right? A diversity of ownership with Madison Square Garden Sports because not only do we get a piece of the Knicks, right? Basketball started again, the Knicks, but we get the Islanders, right? The D League team for the Knicks, as well as some other aspects related to the sports channel and all things Madison Square Garden related to sports. And so those types of investments help us out as investors to keep up with what it says in Ecclesiastes 11:2. Here it says, divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risk might lie ahead. Think about it, invested in the Braves years ago. The Braves have sunken down to I don't know what, but still holding on to that. No biggie. That's still part of my sports portfolio. I love still having some ownership of a piece of the Braves, the Atlanta Braves, and so I'll stick with that. And as they grow and expand, cool. That's through Liberty Media, and no problem. I can live with that. But I like the idea that the Blue Jays are in the World Series and they have an opportunity to not just make an appearance, but increase their fan base, which not only pays off right now, but imagine what that does for Canadian sports, and Canadian sports fans, and memorabilia and things of that nature when we go into next season. Imagine the boost that that's going to do for that company and its fan base just by being in the World Series at this moment. The Dodgers, long lasting um, World Series appearances, God bless them. Former Dodger fan, won't get into it, but yeah, they lost Garvey, they lost me. So, anyway, think about it. When you invest in sports, right? We could have said Dick's Sports, Dick's Sporting Goods, and things of that nature. But keeping with this level right here, the media aspect of it, the sports equipment aspects, the team ownership aspects of it, those are going to be your major movers as this World Series comes to a close. What's going to happen by de facto is, yeah, you're going to have an increase in sales at Dick's Sporting Goods. Yeah, you're going to have an increase in sales at Big Five. Is that going to say Big Five's stock? I don't believe so. I don't believe it's going to be enough to push Big Five into an area of solvency. I do believe that Dick's will continue its dominance in the sporting goods sector, but there are so many opportunities to get into sporting goods. I would probably stick with a manufacturer in a position such as Nike if I were going to do so. As far as broadcasting, like I said, the juggernaut is Disney. The juggernaut is Disney, and Disney's the juggernaut because of look at what they own, look at where they're trying to move, and look at how they're trying to move. It's not a major thing when you see sports packaging altered for streaming services, and Disney is right there saying, hey, if you want it, here's what we offer, along with MMA and other sports. Watch what happens in the future. This is a time to kick off and get ready for the World Series to wrap up and get a piece of what's lingering out there. And I think it's an exciting time for baseball fans as well as investors. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Be good. God bless.